In his doomed-to-fail quest to overturn the results of an election in which voters decisively rejected him and chose the other guy, President-elect Biden, President Trump and his campaign have focused on votes in a few key cities. As we've been discussing, in Michigan, Team Trump is arguing that the entire vote in Wayne County, which is home to Detroit, should not count. In Wisconsin, the Trump campaign paid for recounts in just 2 counties. One of them home to Milwaukee. And in Pennsylvania, Trump and his attorneys have made baseless allegations of widespread fraud in Philadelphia. The New York Times sums it up this way. Mr. Trump's fruitless and pyromaniacal campaign to somehow reverse President-elect Joe Biden's victory in the election rests on the wholesale disenfranchisement of hundreds of thousands of voters, a disproportionate number of them Black Americans living in the urban centers of Georgia, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan. Joining our conversation, Eddie Glaude, chair of the Department of African American Studies at Princeton University. Yamiche is still here. Eddie, there's so much here that represents such a low point, almost an historic low point. And having worked in a Republican Party and believing that we were trying to do better and be better, it is nothing but shame. And I would spend the rest of my life trying to reveal this party for doing this. It is despicable. And the fact that it's out in the open, I wonder if that presents an opportunity to point to it and say, look, I mean, where do you go from here when one party is openly and brazenly not just suppressing the vote, but taking the votes that weren't suppressed and throwing them away?
Well, hopefully you recognize that party for what it is. You know, the Republican Party, as you know, had this dalliance with its far right wing. We know that there's been calls around voter fraud or accusations around voter fraud as part of a kind of playbook in some ways. But I think you said something really important, Nicolle, that we need to emphasize, that this is not, it's unique to Donald Trump insofar as it's a caricature version of it. But America's illiberal impulses always evidence themselves when it comes to Black voters. The late political theorist Judith Sklar said America did not become a full-fledged democracy until the Voting Rights Act of 1965. And we know what was unleashed after that legislation was passed. And we know in some ways that it's around the conflicted nature, the conflicted understanding of Black citizenship, that these illiberal impulses evidence themselves, right, over and over again, every generation. And so here we are in this moment, this inflection point. And your passion in introducing this segment is really key here. We have to finally call it for what it is and root it out. And I think that's clear.
Yamiche, Michael Steele is quoted in that New York Times article as saying, 4 years from now, someone in the Republican Party is going to think that they can make an appeal to Black voters. They're going to have amnesia. They're going to forget that they were part of a party. And if it's anyone thinking about running for president, they're likely someone who right now is staying totally silent about Donald Trump's attack on our democracy and this specific effort to disenfranchise Black voters. What do you think of the fact that you can never go back? I mean, I think that was the point of Michael Steele's quote in the story, that this is now, you have to do away with any attempt by any future chair of the Republican Party. I think Michael Steele was involved in these efforts. Ken Mehlman was involved in these efforts. Ed Gillespie was involved in these efforts. Reince Priebus, I think before he was a Trump Republican, was involved in these efforts called an autopsy, going in and understanding why the Republican Party doesn't and can't and won't appeal to minority voters or people of color. Those efforts can never happen again because this is what the Republican Party is now and forever.
They can try, though. You can imagine a Republican Party that is going to go back in 4 years or 2 years and turn around and act like this all didn't happen, that in fact they're very, very enthusiastic about the idea of going into Detroit or going to Milwaukee or going into Miami-Dade and say, no, you should really be giving us our votes. And by the way, here are all the things that we've been doing for your community. I think what's most ironic about this is that the Trump campaign is trying to do 2 things at once. They're trying to say we upped our votes with Latinos. We got Black men behind behind us. Oh, by the way, those black men in Detroit, those black men in Milwaukee who voted for Joe Biden, they should be disenfranchised. So there is already this, they're doing it right now. You don't have to wait for 4 years to go. Right now, they're saying, hey, thank you for giving you our vote. By the way, your cousin's vote who didn't like us, we don't want that person to vote. I think that this gets to the heart of what a lot of people have been looking at. This is wrapped up in voter suppression. It's wrapped up in the fact that African Americans are some of the most loyal voters for the Democratic Party. But they're also, when you look at black women in particular, they have some of the most highest voting rates of all Americans across all ages and genders when you look at college graduates. So I think that this is the Republican Party and Donald Trump saying we know exactly where the people who don't like us live, and we want to wipe them off of the map.
So unbelievable. And Joe Biden, Eddie, creating a contrast, not just in words, but in deeds, keeping this principle of trying to appoint a diverse cabinet. What do you think of the early selections at the US-UN, which is going to be cabinet level again? He has appointed Linda Thomas Greenfield at Department of Homeland Security. And I think most critics of Donald Trump believe that the biggest stain in terms of policies that came out of that department are around the bucket of immigration. And there's already been some reporting that Joe Biden will try to reverse some of those. He's appointed to head the Department of Homeland Security Alejandro Mayorkas, a Cuban-American who has experience, helped spearhead DACA. It's more than policy reversals, though, right, Eddie? I mean, it is important to have a cabinet that makes policies for all Americans that looks a little bit more like America.
Right. It's a stark contrast between those who are clinging to a world that seems to be dying and who are willing to throw away our democracy for it, and those who are trying to transition into a different way of being together. I think representation matters. I think having a diverse cabinet matters. Also having diverse policies to speak to the conditions of folk in the country. You know, I was thinking about this, Nicolle, as we were talking about what's going on. Black voters sometimes, it's like damned if we do and damned if we don't. If we don't vote, right, at the rate that we should, the country ends up voting for Donald Trump. And if we do vote, they try to take it away from us. I mean, damn. You see what I mean? And so here we are. So I'm really excited about the cabinet. It's a great contrast to the world that's dying. Let's see what happens once he gets in office, once they get to doing their work.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.